Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Performance Marketing Unlocked. Have you ever felt overwhelmed by the amount of changing tech and skills that are required to be a marketer in 2024? Well, you are not alone. And in this week's episode, we are talking about upskilling and imposter syndrome in marketing and why it might affect marketers more than other industries. To talk about this, we are joined in the studio by Kate Burnett, General Manager at DMA Talent, and Yarmila Yu, Chair of the DMA's Talent Council and founder of YUnique Marketing. Listen on to find out more. We only have a few weeks to go until our big Unlocked event of 2024. It is our 2-day event, the most important performance marketing event in your calendar in London, and it takes place on the 5th and 6th of March. We will be hearing from Co-op, Coca-Cola, ASOS and Stephen Bartlett's Diary of a CEO with some extra special guests to be announced soon. So make sure you head to our website and register for the event. Let's get into it because we are also here to talk about imposter syndrome and how this, affects marketers. And especially now, I wanted to talk about what kind of factors contribute to the feelings of imposter syndrome, especially within marketing, and why marketers might be more susceptible than other sectors or job roles. So, Kate, would you like to start us off?
I think there's 3 or 4 main areas, and I don't think these are all distinct to marketing, but I think with marketing, we've got lots of different entry points into the industry. So you can be an apprentice now, you can be a graduate, you can just start your own business. And I think sometimes that makes some people think other routes are more qualified than others. And that leads to a sort of maybe false comparison that makes people feel slightly uncomfortable, I guess, at times. And that could be a lead. But you could say that about many industries. It's also a constantly changing industry. So it's very easy to get tangled up in the changes of tech, the changes of channels, the changes of data use, the changes of governance, and feel like it's all moving too fast and forget that you already know the strong principles of things, and that should guide you well. So I think that is something that people struggle with. And the other one, I think, is not enough importance placed on training in the industry. It's always something that sort of gets dropped if there's a meeting to rush to or something that happens, and it's not in the culture, I don't think. And I think that also contributes to imposter syndrome, people feeling that.
Yeah, and I think, like you said, with tech as well, it's even more important because it's changing so much that not only people keep up to date, but don't feel like they're missing out as well and feel like they're falling behind with all these changes. What are you, Yarmila?
Well, earlier I mentioned about attracting youngsters into the profession, and I use the term youngsters, but it really is any age. But I use that term because I don't view myself as a youngster anymore, because when I reflect back on my career, I've actually been working marketing for 30 years. And yes, had my big 50 birthday a little while back. So I do view that as sort of the youngsters coming. Everyone else is younger, and those that I interact with in the market, they're all typically younger than me. There are several things. I mean, imposter syndrome, it now has a label. We now know it is imposter syndrome, and we've been talking about that for the last few years. But it's been around since imposter syndrome, since the mid-70s, when it was first labelled by psychologists then. I see it show up in marketeers. I see it show up in entrepreneurs. I see it show up in business leaders. I work with all of those individuals in my day-to-day work. And yes, there's commonalities between them. And in most professions, there is this fast pace of change, but none that is just as fast as marketing. And if I, again, reflect back over the last 30 years, the change that I've seen in marketing and the switch from old school to sort of modern methods, it's just so rapid, it's just so vast. And there is this feeling that over especially the last 20 years since the great big financial crisis in the mid-2000s, where organisations made themselves go lean in their teams, reduced headcount, reduced the size of their marketing teams as well as their overall marketing spend budgets, there is this expectation that fewer people have to achieve more. So there's a lot of pressure that business is actually putting on its people and on its marketeers. And for those few that are within that marketing department within an organisation, or maybe they could just be the sole marketeer within a business, oh my goodness, that's a lot of pressure to think they've got to be the go-to, the expert, the know-it-all of everything. And with businesses expecting excellence as well, they're wanting the performance, and obviously we're talking about performance marketing as well. They're looking for excellence in execution. They're looking for strategic decision-making abilities. They're looking for not just the creative, the big idea that's going to capture people's and consumers' and businesses' imagination, but they're looking for the how to get that done. So we've got to be analytical. We've almost got to be programmers and coders, and oh my goodness, I feel exhausted just saying all of that. But we can't be all of those things. But the pressure we put on ourselves is immense. So I think, to Kate's point about professional development, every day is a school day. I always use that phrase with my mentees. Every opportunity is a learning opportunity. We never stop learning. It's not when you leave school. It's not when you leave university. It's not when you finish that apprenticeship program. The method and learning needs to stay with you throughout your entire career. There's always something new to learn. And if we can embed that sense of learning and understanding that even if we give up an hour a week to some learning, whether it's just leafing through, a book, doing some online research, or going on a specific webinar or a course, or listening to a podcast, then you'll start to help to remove some of that overwhelm that you might be starting to experience with the imposter syndrome, because you're training your mind to think, actually, you're trying to stay ahead of the game. You're trying to stay on top of your game. So just some thoughts there.
And it's interesting what you say about entry points as well. There's so many different entry points. I mean, I think I was podcasting and we were talking about the varied skills that people required to be a marketer now, and they are so varied. And she was saying, this is when your team becomes so important, rather than trying to have all those different skills and that analytical, creative, performance and branding together. Surround yourself by people that can do a bit of everything and be the expert in your field, and build a team that supports that. And I know we're going to talk about the government skills bootcamps in a little bit, but I wanted to talk about, as you were talking about youngsters, is upskilling important for all levels of seniority?
Oh, absolutely. And one aspect I would highlight is leadership training. So often you see people being promoted into more senior roles or into a leadership of a function role, such as marketing director or chief marketing officer, VP of marketing, because they've done a great job. They've got great results doing that particular specialist role that they've had. But rarely along the way do we dedicate enough time to learning about leadership skills, managing people. And so suddenly you can find yourself trying to cling on to your past role, and this is where you start to get overwhelmed because you're doing your old job with the new job, grappling with, oh my goodness, how do you manage a team? How do you lead a function? Still doing your old job because that's your comfort zone. That's what you know. But actually, you've got to really release yourself from that. And you have to focus in on leading the function, managing the team to get the best out of that team, and focus on that team building and team development and nurturing so they can do their best work. And sometimes you do have to let go and let somebody else have a go and learn and explore those pieces. But so it's equally as important to not just stay ahead with professional development on a marketing specialist topic, but also, if you're an aspiring future marketing leader, start to look at some courses where you can get some leadership training, to know how to best lead and develop a team.
And so, Kate, I know you've been working with the government skills bootcamps. Can you tell us about the kind of, what they're solving and how they're helping?
So I think that comes from that sort of skills for life. In fact, I think that's the name of the full campaign, which is about, introducing a more positive attitudes towards lifelong learning. So I think it's a very positive scheme, because what it's done really, so a skills bootcamp is up to 16-week training program, which can be fully funded by the government if it's somebody who's unemployed or self-employed, or it can be part funded and part of an upskilling program for an organisation. And for small businesses, the government fund 90% of the course cost. So that is a huge funding, to enable people. And what it's done, it's taken away the financial barrier for organisations. So that's enabled, from our point of view, we've seen a lot of SMEs taking up. In fact, I think we had a target of being asked to have 60% of SMEs reskilling with us. We were over 80%.
Wow.
So, and Yarmila references where there's just one person in the organisation doing marketing, or in fact, whether it's the business owner, who's working, looking at how do they expand. And what bootcamps do is they take the cost away and they give a very broad-based, in our case, their digital marketing strategy bootcamp, which covers all the fundamentals of digital marketing. So I think it's been very positive on that front. What it doesn't get away from is we still have to invest the time, and we still have to want people to invest the time in our businesses to take that on. And I still think that's a small barrier to people taking on the boot camps that we as an industry need to address. And I think, again, Yarmila mentioned that 1 hour a week. That's been a sort of micro upskilling campaign the DMA have driven to say, put 1 hour a week aside. Here's all the content for you to be able to do that. It can be a course, it can be a podcast, it can be a webinar, it can be a variety of different things just to keep yourself upskilling. So I think it's been, that's been quite insightful working with Department for Education, getting those boot camps off the ground. But I think as a policy, it's quite successful policy, and a great thing, I think, for government to be supporting businesses to reskill their teams. We've talked about moving from perhaps different areas of business, perhaps more experienced marketers feeling that they were great with their traditional marketing channels and very good at strategy, but how do you write an email marketing plan? What should my search engine optimization be looking like, for our website? So, it's covered a really broad spectrum, of training needs, right the way through to junior marketers, people using it almost as an onboarding. In an agency, perhaps when somebody's not got a full diary, I know that changes very rapidly, but when their diary isn't full and people aren't in the office to spend time, the boot camps have been a great way for them to sort of get their juniors up and running with a really broad digital marketing knowledge plan. So I think as a policy, it's been successful, and the industry uptake has been pretty good.
I mean, yes, it's interesting when you say it's like the challenge is, I don't want to say convincing, but kind of encouraging businesses to put the time aside for their employees. Is this? But in turn, it's always going to make your people better, because if you expect someone to hit the ground running in a new role straight away, you're losing out on the people that might need a little time to get there, and then in the end be better, after they've had a little bit of training and allowed to get to that place. But whilst we're talking about upskilling, and it's important for all levels of seniority, I'd like to talk about if you've personally experienced imposter syndrome, in both your wonderful and spanning careers, and how did you navigate through it?
I don't feel I've ever had imposter syndrome, but I think we all have moments where we know we ought to know something more about parts of our job, and and that can encourage you to train more, to learn more. But I think I'm always very transparent about what I do and I don't know, because I accept that I can't be an expert in everything. And a lot of my job now is looking at skills overall and talking to governments and working with universities and working on apprenticeship programs. So I accept my knowledge on SEO won't be brilliant, compared to others. But I think you've got to be honest about what you know. And I think what your job requires, both for you to deliver it and to grow in that role.
What about you, after your 30 years?
After 30 years, oh my goodness. There have been several moments. I wouldn't necessarily say that because I didn't know the label back then to be thinking about it as imposter syndrome, but I think it's only natural that you have moments where you have doubt, you have that self-doubt when you get moved into a new role and you think, well, can I do this? And you have to sort of start to think, well, they wouldn't have given me this role if they didn't see something within me that they felt I was going to be able, to do some good with this. So, you've got to overcome those feelings of self-doubt. I mean, I've switched career, well, not exactly career, but I've changed direction. So I started out in telesales, that moved into sales, and it was back in those days, realizing if I did this little thing called marketing, I think my sales could be improved. And so I started off as a salesperson. So I went on evening classes and then got my diploma in marketing. And then I thought, actually, do you know what? I'm enjoying doing this marketing as well as the sales, but actually I want to do more of marketing. And then that's what launched me into fully going into marketing, but definitely with a commercial head on my shoulders. But then switching from those days where I worked in startups to then moving to a mid-sized firm, to then moving to a corporate and a blue chip the size of an IBM, in fact 2 tours of duty at IBM, and then to more recently, 7 years ago, setting up my own business. Those are changes where at each of those points you think, oh, can I do this? You have those moments where you sort of question yourself. And it comes down to confidence. But learning and professional development and continual learning is, I think, a huge boost to giving you that confidence to say to yourself, I might not know this, I'm going to go on this course, I'm going to learn this, I can do this, I've got this. So it's a huge sort of boost. So I think we have to look at what's going to give us confidence to actually move through it and navigate it. But yes, there's lots of times where suddenly you start, whether you'd call it imposter syndrome or not, you sort of question yourself, second guess yourself and think, actually, just give it a go. What's the worst thing that could happen? Let's just give it a go.
That
Got to be positive.
gives you that extra push as well. It's like anything, isn't it? A little bit of anxiety is good because it gives you that sort of push to get out there and do something and try something new, extend your skills, whatever that may be.
Yeah, there's good and bad adrenaline. So
yes, yeah. I always say it shows you care. If I'm, really suffering, I'm so nervous about something. It's because I know I want it. It's because I know I'm, really passionate about this and I care about the outcome. Yeah. So it's a good thing, as horrible as it might feel as well.
Absolutely, but really getting to understand yourself and having self-awareness of who you are, what makes you tick, what's your purpose, why are you doing the job you're doing, why are you in the career you're in. That can all be, prompts to give you renewed confidence and excitement in what you're doing and propel you forward.
Absolutely. Well, whilst we've been talking about skills that marketers need, I'd like to move forward, especially in 2024. I think AI was one expert's word of the year last year after, the explosion that was generative AI. And, we've spoken about how traditional marketers have had to grapple with email and SEO and things like that. And we are on a performance marketing podcast. But what skills would you say that marketers should focus on acquiring to stay competitive in 2024? If there are any skills they should focus on at all?
If I could just offer a quick insight. Some of the marketers that I work with that are new into the industry and that have grown up within sort of the digital environment, it's very easy for them to be reliant on the tools that are now available to us. So some of the core training that we would have gone through, 30 years ago, such as copywriting and writing copy and messaging and value proposition work and positioning, is handled differently these days. And so I see that there are some struggles, and I'm fearful. I'm looking forward to how AI can help us in so many different ways, but I am fearful that we may become over-reliant on it in the near term, and we may find a dip in actual marketing performance, because unless you can be truly authentic, and I am one of those purists that think, brands do need to be authentic and have their own tone of voice. We can't just be, other versions of others. We're going to lose something. We're going to lose that attractiveness to individual markets that would want us. And I am fearful that there will be over-reliance on AI to generate lots of copy. And without having some experience in copywriting, copy editing, we may not feel the confidence to understand what AI is giving us and then amend it so that we can enrich it. So I'm all for using AI, especially, within marketing, but there's still the need for the human and the human skill set to enrich it, to ensure that it is truly, on brand, but authentic brand voice. And I do worry. I see it with simple things like the Word and other applications are available, but we rely on that to be our spell checker and grammar check, but you've still got to cast your eye over it even after you've just put your fingers to the keyboard and typed, you still need to cast your eye over it to sort of spot any errors and mistakes that are there. Because again, that's your reputation that's then, on the line if you're putting something out there that's not, excellent.
And I think also in terms of when you talk about authentic work from brands, at the current state of how AI has developed, you don't want things to start looking the same as well. You want to keep all these individualities between brands and their tone of voice and everything. So that's an important thing to keep.
And other apps, you recognise it, and they can actually see if something's been, chat GPT'd, and the content is there. So search engines and Google, will penalise it. It will push you down the ranking. So you've got to be careful. You've got to just be careful with it.
I think some of that comes back to making sure you've got those basic marketing skills in place first. So you've got that knowledge, as you say, of things like copywriting, of understanding data strategy, of understanding, how putting a campaign together works. I think you need all that as your starting point, but and I think some skills that obviously have become more important recently around data analytics, around spotting trends, around spotting insights. So I think if you've got those fundamentals in place, I think it's about how you use AI to integrate and develop what you're doing. If you start from the right place, I think actually we had a really brilliant webinar recently on copywriting and AI and how you can use AI as a starter for anything to get you going. But you're right, you then still need the skills. So I worry less about us running out of those skills, as long as you have the fundamentals in place, and that's back to that training, and having that core skill training and knowledge early in your career. But I think it presents a fantastic opportunity to cut to the really interesting stuff, to get that start, then to develop it. And I think, we all know it's easier to start with something to look at than to start with a blank sheet of paper in any situation. So I think, the skill is how do you integrate AI into what you're doing, and whether that's helping, but also starting to think about other aspects in terms of ethics of AI and how we work with algorithms, how that human touch is applied to the decisions that you're making as well. I agree with you. The human touch is obviously essential. And where that creativity comes from. But I do think having the start is fine, and then applying that skill that you've got to it's almost a shortcut.
It's a huge opportunity from a from a talent attraction perspective as well for the industry and for businesses, because marketing is now much broader than it was back in the day, where it was much more just the creative. So we're able to attract people with different core skills, interest areas, and that's what we're needing. We're needing a more diverse team within the marketing function, and to be representative also of the society that we're serving, that brand is particularly serving its products and services to. So I think it's having more technology present within marketing is an enabler for helping us to actually build more diverse and potentially, therefore, more high-performing and sustainable teams.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, it seems that it's a dialogue with AI, isn't it? It's not a reliance. It's you have to retain a critical thinker and not just kind of accept it for what it churns out. Well, we have got through the easy questions for today, and we are on to the PMW Resell Me a pen challenge. Which, as we've got two guests, are we going to do it? Is it a joint effort?
I don't know how we're going to do this. We've got a minute, haven't we?
You've got 60 seconds, yeah.
Yeah, well...
How about I kick off with the sort of benefits?
Okay. You can tell me how to prepare this.
I don't know. What do you think?
No, that sounds good, Kate. You kick off. You kick off with the benefits, and then I can dive in with strategically how it could be.
Okay, well, I have tasked Yarmila and Kate to resell the BlackBerry, which was chosen by our previous guest, Nick Bamber, who's the head of digital at Domino's. So, I mean, BlackBerry was a staple in business communications for a while, so it's nice to hear it come back. But when you are ready, we'll start with Kate. Resell me a BlackBerry.
Okay, so I think the BlackBerry's one of its most sustaining features is that keyboard. Nice, tactile, it moves. You can use it when you've got your gloves on, doesn't get upset about that. It's extremely secure, Barack Obama famously had a BlackBerry over a smartphone. Very durable. I actually ran over mine with an estate car once and it still worked afterwards. Didn't have to pay £100 to replace the screen. But the big thing for me is organisation focus from a work point of view. It does email, it does text, it does phone calls brilliantly. Can't lose 2 hours falling down the LinkedIn hole. Can't do Instagram reel scrolling. It just keeps you really, really focused. So target audience, I think, is probably...
Right, Kate, you can't probably see us on the screen because you're listening to this as a podcast, but Kate is now looking over at me. And
I think it's us.
It's us, yeah. So yes, target audience is the business audience. It's the corporate user. I had one. I had lots of friends that had them in business, and we were all quite sad when it went. We obviously made the switch because we're progressive to the sort of the touch screen phones of that we all know and love now. However, times are changing. We're even seeing automotive manufacturers that have the big touch screens within cars. Actually hearing back from the consumers are now actually saying, no, bring the buttons back. So absolutely,
the BlackBerry buttons.
The BlackBerry returns with BlackBerry buttons to support actually what the consumers are asking for. Give the people what they want. The people want a BlackBerry, so let's give them a BlackBerry.
Oh, that's brilliant. We did run over, but not by too long. Not by too long. I wanted to hear where that was going to go. Because, tactile things, everyone's really interested in that at the moment, aren't they? But I was interested in your points about security. Barack Obama, there's your influencer.
Productivity as well. Although I'm not so sure we would do an ad campaign actually showing what Kate had done, which was to actually run over it. I don't think we'll want to encourage that kind of behaviour.
Humour's coming back into marketing, isn't it?
You could also have a bit of a cheeky social media campaign, which basically said BlackBerry users not welcome till 5:30. You've got to get off, you get on, get focused with your BlackBerry, get your work done.
Yeah.
And then you can hit Instagram Reels once you've finished.
Then you can play, yeah.
Keep
apart
focused.
from those social media folks that need to be on Reels and doing all that kind of stuff, but I'm sure there's other devices for them. But
the other guests are going to kill me that I've let you go on for so far before giving my verdict.
Well, there are two of us.
So
it was actually more of a challenge for you than it was for us.
Well, I have to say, without a shadow of a doubt, you have resold
Hey!
the BlackBerry
Yay!
to a modern day audience with a semi-performance marketing strategy to go alongside of it. But yeah, I think I was most convinced by the getting rid of the LinkedIn scrolling, the Instagram scrolling, giving you that focus.
Get focused.
Yeah, the focus of productivity. The UK's got a productivity gap. And so, that's what business needs. We need to get our productivity up. So, yeah, switch to the BlackBerry. Rim, come back.
You've
All is forgiven.
You've sold it.
I know. Did you need us to say a sentence about the challenge we're setting the next person?
We think the holiday postcard. Everyone used to send a postcard when they went on holiday, and we always used to love receiving them, and that's now stopped.
I think that's a good one. I still send podcasts if I go away. Postcards if I go away. But I find, especially with the European Post, they arrive after I've returned back home. So
Lovely to receive, though. I still enjoy receiving a postcard, even though I'm not very good at sending them. It's slightly hypocritical.
Well, thank you both so much for coming on this podcast, talking about upskilling, imposter syndrome, and bringing back the buttons. It's been an absolute pleasure.
You're most welcome.
That's it. That's the copy.
Thank you. It copyrights
the
itself. Who needs ChatGPT? We've done it. There you go.
Thank you very much for listening to this week's episode of Performance Marketing Unlocked. We hope you have enjoyed it. And as always, we like to know what you think. So if you have liked this episode, give it a follow, leave a review, and head to performancemarketingworld.com to subscribe to everything performance marketing from us. I'm your host, Lucy Shelley. Thanks for listening, and I will see you next time.